As we discussed last video in this series, teachers don't really exist. The sooner that concept makes sense to you, the sooner we can talk about the best way to learn from them. Leveraging our coaching in a way that's effective and not codependent. Most people are too dependent on teachers, mentors, coaches, and authority figures, waiting around for them to hand them information and give them permission to learn. This dependence fosters, whether consciously or unconsciously, a passivity in one's learning, ingraining the idea that lessons are something to be given to us by someone else, rather than taken of our own initiative. Knowledge, skill, and ability are ours if we choose to acquire them. An idea sharply in contrast to the traditional model of schooling, where the teacher is a gatekeeper of knowledge and the learner merely a passive recipient of their expertise. Learning, to be effective, must be an active process. Effective learning comes from the discovery of knowledge, not from receiving it. Our mistakes are the things that turn our minds into fertile ground for lessons to take root. This is true in a neurochemical sense as well. You Andrew Huberman fans watching this video will know that iteration and failure are not just hurdles we have to clear in order to get to our eventual goal or desired outcome. They are the very thing that make the neuroplasticity, that make those neurological changes possible in the first place. If we want to learn effectively, we have to be proactive in the process. Education isn't something you undergo. It's a technology that works best when both students and teachers know how to operate their end of it. Knowing how to ask a question well is crucial for making your learning efforts effective, and it makes you more likely to get a satisfactory answer. But it's also a matter of manners. Real skill and expertise is hard-won and difficult to come by. Querying someone who's gone through the work it takes to reach a high level of competence in any given field while putting no effort in to do so well shows that you're not willing to think or do some homework yourself, and demonstrates you have no interest in learning the technical details of the craft. You're just looking to use this person as a sounding board. In doing research for this video, I racked my brain to think of the most prolific self-guided learners I could come up with. So naturally, I turned to the folks at GitHub, a forum where coders and computer programmers of all stripes go to post questions and exchange ideas. This video draws heavily from a GitHub post titled, "How to Ask Questions Better." I don't code, you might not either, that's fine. The ideas, tactics, and techniques discussed in this video can be applied to just about any interest or field of study. We'll discuss what to try before you ask a question, how to ask a question, and then what to do with an answer. This entire point can be summarized with the phrase, search, then ask. Take the time to go through the steps I'm going to describe. We're going after real learning and skill acquisition here. And usually a couple seconds or a couple minutes of Googling is not going to be enough time to truly work your way through and understand a complex problem. Read through the material, take the time to digest it, and sit with the question that you have. If you're watching a video like this, you probably already have a number of books, courses, lecture notes, maybe even projects you completed in the past that could be helpful to you at this stage. Look through the materials you already have access to. See if the answer you seek is located somewhere in there, or you can piece it together yourself based on the information you already have access to. Put them to use instead of letting them keep gathering dust in a lonely corner of your hard drive. After this, we turn to Google. Many would place this as the first step, but we've saved it until now for a reason. The internet's greatest strength is in some sense also its greatest weakness. The low barrier to entry and sheer volume of information available online can make it great for search and discovery, but at this point in the process, more is not better. Better is better. Curated content directly targeted at our current area of interest comes first. If you're trying to solve a technical problem, most developers and manufacturers these days have manuals and documentation that are actually really high quality. High quality forums are also great resources. Not all forums are created equally, but mature forums with an active, dedicated, and knowledgeable user base can connect you with skilled and like-minded communities of people. These sites will often have a start here or FAQ or read this first section. That's a wealth of information in and of itself. Even if you can't find your answer there, those tabs or sidebars can typically direct you towards resources, articles, books, courses that can be helpful in your search. Again, if the internet is a vast ocean, we're trying to stay in the harbors we know are safe and populated by helpful, skilled, knowledgeable tradesfolk, not get shipwrecked or caught in a storm in an attempt to find some exotic location at sea. I'm of the opinion that to read well, one rarely stops at just reading. This information is meant to be interacted with and actively engaged with, put into practice. That's the only way it sticks or ever truly means anything. Try to put to use the information you've come across so far. Even if you haven't run into a step-by-step guide on how to solve your exact problem, try to work out a solution using the information you've gained this far in the process. Play with the ideas and processes you come across. Take them apart and put them back together. Engage in honest experimentation with what you found and see if you can come across a solution another way that you haven't tried yet. If not, keep note of what happens when you do try these new ideas out for use later on. If you still haven't found an answer, try phoning a friend. This is where those notes you've been keeping start to come in handy. Run by a skilled peer what you found so far and see if they can offer a different set of eyes on the problem. Even if their overall skill level is the same as yours, they still see things from a different angle, so you guys can still help each other. Let's say we're both level 3 video editors. You may be at the same level as me, but somewhat better at graphics and slightly worse at pacing and B-roll. Each of us can still learn something from the other because our expertise is distributed differently within the domain of Adobe Premiere. Assuming you're still following along, you've done all the preliminary steps, you've done the groundwork, done your research, done your homework, made a genuine crack at solving this problem yourself, and now you're ready to get an answer from someone else. When you finally ask someone else your question, display that you've gone through the steps that we've discussed so far. Communicate what you've done to try to address this problem and what issues you encountered in your attempts to solve it yourself. This not only shows that you are genuinely invested in actively finding an answer, but allows the answerer to get more insight into your problem and shows what pathways may not work towards finding a solution. While we're working on generating our high-quality question tailored toward our specific problem, we want to make sure that we don't ask the wrong question. So actively try to iron out any false assumptions that we may have made along the way. Demonstrate to the answerer that you are willing to actively help develop a solution. You're not looking for an exact recipe or exact steps that you should follow. Remember, we're autonomous learners. We're looking for resources that we should have checked and what our example could be missing. We're looking for pointers from somebody more experienced than ourselves. We are not looking for someone to hold our hand. If you're trying to find out how to do something, start by describing the goal. For example, I'm trying to transition from the D to the A major chord while playing the song Goner by 21 Pilots. Then, and only then, describe the step that's giving you trouble. Beginning with a description of what we're trying to do can allow someone else to step in and point out that we've been inadvertently taking the long way around. We set the stage by describing our desired outcome. Now we can discuss the way our problem is manifesting. We're attempting that chord transition from Goner, and the D string is buzzing and the note is not ringing out correctly after I make the transition. That's our specific step. We now describe the research we did to try and understand the problem, the steps we took to try and address it, and provide a reproduction of the problem in a controlled environment by giving a minimal test case. A minimal test case is an illustration of your problem that's just large enough to exhibit the undesirable outcome, but no larger. Smaller is better here. This is an idea from coding, but it can and should be applied elsewhere. This could be a specific section of a song that you're having have trouble playing, a specific grappling sequence that keeps causing you to lose position, a math problem with an attempted solution laid out on paper for the teacher to see. Coming prepared with a material example means that we can have substantive conversation in the native language of the practice instead of saying, I want to win the wrestle, but he won't let me. Mathematics doesn't take place in English. It's its own language and is best discussed in that particular tongue. We can talk about music all day, but once we actually start to play the problematic section of the piece, we can really start kicking ideas back and forth about how to solve the problem at hand because we're conversing through melody instead of through syllable. So far, this has probably sounded incredibly abstract, needlessly complicated, incredibly time-consuming, and pretty unhelpful. It doesn't have to be that way. We're going to go through an example. Let's say that I'm trying to play the song Goner by 21 Pilots. I'm trying to transition from the D major to the A major chord. I have Guitar Ninja's beginner course, and I've looked through it. I've tried to find an answer in the r/guitar subreddit. And both the wiki and the music theory for guitarists 1 sections have said to use these particular chord shapes when I'm transitioning from one to the other. However, when I do this, the D string is not ringing the note out correctly. It's making this buzzing sound after I make the transition. I've tried pulling more into the fretboard using the muscles of my upper back to apply more even pressure to the strings, adjusting the position of my wrist so it's flexed more, and drilling the specific chord change, attempting to see how many changes I can get in the course of a minute, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. My numbers have gone up, but the issue still happens when I actually try to play the song. I'll then include a live video if I'm posting on a forum, or play live the section of the piece that I'm having trouble with for my instructor if we're having this conversation in person. Now, the potential answerer knows what you've tried and what has or hasn't worked. Now they can tell you, hey, that's the normal fingering for A major, but if you switch your first and second fingers around with each other, you can pivot in place on the fretboard and move just 2 of your fingers instead of all 3. This makes it easier and faster to do the change while you're playing that song. The GitHub folks put this eloquently. Groveling isn't a substitute for doing your homework. Self-deprecation and self-effacement are unbecoming and unhelpful, both for you and for others. It's a common reflex for a beginner seeking aid, and we've all done it. But the energy and time spent on these things is better applied towards actually finding a solution and actually learning a thing or two. We've done all this work to put together as good a question as we can possibly manage. We've read and we've Googled, we've studied the material, and we've gotten our hands dirty and attempted to actually solve the problem ourselves. We phrased our question carefully and brought an example into class. We got an answer and we don't get it. Now, we're going to handle this a little differently depending on if we're asking in person versus online. If it's in person and you don't understand, do try to clarify to ensure that you and the answerer are on the same page and using the same terminology. Listen actively and note any concepts, terminology, or technical language you may be unfamiliar with. Keep track of them as search terms for use later on. And understand that for real skill acquisition, understanding will come with implementation and experimentation. The true aha moments are likely to come with a little bit of discussion and a lot of trial and error. The insight you seek is unlikely to fall out of the sky in the form of a well-worded answer from your professor. If you're online and asking a question through a jiu-jitsu forum, and someone tells you sounds like you aren't clearing your opponent's frames before attempting the guard pass, don't immediately reply with, what's a frame? In this context, if the answerer uses a word or refers to a concept that you're not yet familiar with, don't just immediately shoot them back with, what's that? Use the tools you used to address the question originally. Manuals, FAQs, search the web, use skilled friends, and digest and understand the answer you just received. If you still need clarification, then ask for it using this process that we've gone through so far. much more effective than immediately asking this person a question that you could have Googled, that you could have found the answer to in a course or by asking one of your skilled friends, is to respond with something akin to, I've read the main page FAQ about framing and defenses for it, but when I take a C grip on my opponent's arm to collapse his frame, he uses the connection to invert for an entry to Ashigarami. How do I collapse the frame and initiate the pass without leaving an entry for a leg entanglement? That's specific, that's actionable, and it's much more helpful to you as the questioner. After a solution to the problem has been found, follow up with all the people who helped you along the way. Let them know how things turned out and thank them for their assistance. This will likely result in you explaining the solution several times to several different people, which will further cement your understanding, will make them feel appreciated, and will foster a sense of community that is crucial for any long-term understanding. Marie Forleo says everything is figure-outable, and we want this to be the first thing on our mind whenever we run across something that we haven't heard before or aren't yet familiar with. Take the time, make the effort to search and try to answer the question yourself. If you can't, it's fine. But in doing so, you will have learned a lot more along the way than you would have if you just immediately started bombarding your professor, your teacher, or the people around you with questions that could have been solved independently had you put in less than the bare minimum. When you do end up asking a question to somebody else, give them context, give them the problem statement phrased the way that we reviewed, give them a minimal test case as an example, and take back the reins of your own education. In an upcoming video, we'll wrap up this 3-part series by discussing some helpful mindsets as an independent learner to help you along your way. Thanks for watching.